Good evening, or good morning, I should say. I'm very pleased to be a part of this historic conference. And since we do not have much time, I want to go ahead and start my presentation without delay. I intend to talk about the topic that I was asked to address, that is the significance of Afrocentric theory in combating alienation, antisocial behavior, and crime. I want to suggest that at the heart of alienation and antisocial behavior, there's a feeling of deep isolation, a sense of being stuck somewhere with very few options, a feeling of really not being connected to other people. And that's when it becomes possible to hurt those people to whom I don't feel connected. Those people who remind me who I am, um, and how terrible it is who I am. And so um, I want to argue here that Afrocentricity can indeed be of great help by fostering Pan-African awareness. That is the awareness that we are part of a community that is much larger than the block we live on or the neighborhood we live on. Also, Afrocentricity fosters critical thinking, by providing us with the tools to understand where we are and who we are, and what are the different factors that impact our lives and make our lives so difficult at times, in particular white racism and white supremacy. So Afrocentricity is also about allowing us to increase our knowledge about African history and culture. And certainly, and this is quite important, Afrocentricity also fosters what we call a consciousness of victory as opposed to consciousness of oppression. Consciousness of oppression is debilitating. Consciousness of victory gives you the inspiration, the courage, the hope, and the faith, right, in yourself, your faith in your own ability to change your reality. By basically encouraging you to exercise your agency as opposed to feeling like a helpless victim. So I want to illustrate what this could look like by using the teaching of the African diaspora to US African American children. I say US because obviously the United States or the African people in the United States make up of part of the African diaspora, and certainly not all of it. And I think, unfortunately, many times our children in the United States are not made aware enough, right, of the fact that they are part of the whole that we call the African diaspora. So, of course, when we teach about the African diaspora, we have to say that it all began with the European, decision to set up a business venture that people call a slave trade, and through that or because of that business venture, then millions of Africans were forcibly and brutally removed from Africa and dispersed throughout the Americas, and this was the largest forced migration in human history. As a result of this great dispersion of African people taken all over the Americas, there are today, of course, numerous African communities in the Caribbean, North, Central, and South America. And it is important for us to explain to African American children in the United States that, quote unquote, only 6% of those Africans taken out of Africa actually made it to the United States. I know my students are always surprised, 6%, only 6%. Yeah, 6%. It was 6% too many, but it was only 6%. And so where did the 94% go? That's the question that needs to be answered. And they went to the Caribbean, which is already the home of over 45 million Africans. They went to Brazil, where we today have well over 100 million Africans. They may not know they're Africans, but they really are Africans. And in fact, it's in Brazil that we have the largest concentration of Africans outside of Africa. And then also that the African people living virtually in every South American country. So if we look at places like Venezuela, 15% of the people in Venezuela can trace their ancestry back to Africa. In Peru, it's 10%, Colombia, 40%, and Brazil, well over 50%. Some people go as far as 70% of Black people in Brazil. Of course, we wouldn't know that by watching those stupid, silly uh, soap operas from Brazil, because they primarily have white people. But when you go there, you see that the reality is very different. And so, what do African Americans share with those other Africans? This is really what we need to emphasize. Um, they share obviously a collection of pictures that show that they're here in Colombia. Here we have African children in Brazil, African children in Haiti, African children in Cuba, and African children in the United States. So clearly, those facts of the from Brazil, if you look at them, these children need to be aware of this, that there are African people around them um, who look like them, and they look like them because they come from the same place and they share the same history, the same history that begins in Africa, where we draw our common origin and history. This history we should emphasize is the consciousness of victory here is important, that we had a very glorious history, especially with the Nile Valley civilizations, where it is believed that human civilization may have started, especially with Kemet and Nubia, um, which basically represent our classical foundations. We could also talk to them about the golden age of African history, especially with very prestigious West African empires. Here we see the king of Mali, Mansa Musa, holding a gold nugget, and Mansa Musa was is said to have been or be the wealthiest man to have ever lived on earth. And then, of course, then we have the Mafa, when Europeans basically come in and create this profound disruption and subject us to experiences that we could have never imagined, that we even today that we cannot imagine. And this is what I call the harshest depression it only was. You see our back here that really speaks volumes about again what we went through. I want to go back to this map for a minute. It's a useful map because it shows again all the different places of origin and arrival, right? So you see, Montevideo, Rio de Janeiro, Recife, but also, all the South America, the British Guiana, French Guiana, Dutch Guiana, Mexico, Jamaica, and all here. You can see Cuba and all the Caribbean islands right here, going all the way up to New York, but even in Canada also. The only thing that is not good about this map is really this label of African slave trade. Again, there's no such thing as the African slave trade. There's only a European slave trade, and it was not even really a trade. Um, but also, what is important to emphasize is the African resistance to oppression that was a common response to from us, regardless of where we found ourselves. And that resistance took many forms. And I borrowed this from Maulana Karanga's textbook in Black Studies. There was cultural resistance, day-to-day resistance, armed resistance, Maroon communities, abolitionism, meaning the Africans who sought to put a legal end to slavery, immigrationism, people who say, let's just get out of here, let's go back to Africa or Haiti or some other place. And it's more important also, again, for the sake of consciousness of victory, to emphasize that we had common victories, especially thanks to Maroon communities in the United States. We know that we had many Maroon communities, about 200, and the largest one was the Afro-Seminole Maroon community in Florida that united Native Americans and Black people, whom we can see here in the process of slaughtering a few white people. I like to show that picture to my students because, again, it reverses things and show them clearly that we don't just sit there and take oppression. And just like our ancestors did not, we should not either. So that should really be an encouragement to fight back and organize resistance, successful resistance. In Haiti, of course, we know we had very famous Maroon leaders like Macandal and Boukman, Macandal in 1750, who had decided to poison the water and have white people drink it and instruct black people not to drink, the water. And his goal was to basically rid the whole island, white people. And Boukman, of course, who was at the Bois ceremony, which we see represented here. And it was all done under the auspices of voodoo, with a black pig sacrificed for Ezeli Danto. And then here's Toussaint, also about Dessalines and Christophe, who were able together and along with the people and men, women, children, to basically defeat the French. In Brazil, we also had Zumbi, who was at some point the leader of the largest Roman community in the Americas with over like 30,000 people at the Quilombo dos Palmares. But that was not the only Quilombo. There were many Quilombos in Brazil. And one thing that I would like to stress, but I won't be able to dwell on it because I don't have enough time for that. But maybe we can talk about it later, is that African religion, that is the beliefs, the practices, the rituals that we brought from Africa, sustained many times, our desire for freedom and helped us basically, garner the courage and the persistence and the endurance that we needed to fight back. So we could also look at other cultural aspects in addition to religion, like music, dance festivals, Nomo, why is the spoken word so important to us, the old tradition, the food that we all eat, what we call soul food in the United States. What does it look like in the Caribbean? What does it look like in Brazil? What does it look like in Mexico? What does it look like in Venezuela, and so on and so forth? And we would see that we really share so much. Here I had meant to talk to you about the similarities between the Harlem Renaissance and the Negritude movement, but again, I don't have time to do this. And so I will go to the end of my presentation here with also the need, in my opinion, to emphasize the common and current challenges of racism and discrimination. It's not just about talking about the past, it was all beautiful, we were caught, we fought back, we won, we were free, but it's understanding that our Maafa continues, that the same people who enslaved our ancestors are still keeping their foot right on our head, and that the same ideology of white racism is still very much a part of our lives. And so, like our ancestors were able to deconstruct it and fight it, so what can we do? What can we do to put an end to our social and economic discrimination? What can we do to fight against our political underrepresentation? And what do we do with the fact that we are so confused about who we are, right? Many of us do not want to be associated with Africa because of this violent and constant anti-African propaganda. But there's also today as well a common expression of resistance. Just like our ancestors resisted, we are resisting, right? So what will the children gain from developing a Pan-African awareness? Obviously, a connection with other African people based on a better understanding and appreciation of the African experience in a global way, right? So you see beyond your, your town, your neighborhood, a great appreciation for the cultural and historical similarities between them and other Africans. It will, I believe, foster harmony and solidarity between children from different backgrounds. It will definitely increase our knowledge about the African will also make us more aware of African resistance to oppression inside and outside of the United States, which I think is very important because, many times we engage in self-destructive behaviors because we feel very hopeless. We feel very hopeless. But if we know, if the spirit of resistance can be ignited in us, through teachings about other people resisting and fighting, maybe, right? Maybe our life will mean more to us. And maybe the lives of other Black people will mean more to us. And finally, may provide students with additional positive role models to identify with. We need as many of such positive role models as we can. Harriet Tubman was a wonderful woman, and Nanny was also a wonderful woman. So what do those two women share? Nat Turner was a great man, but what about Toussaint Louverture? What about Dessalines? What about Zumbi? What about Yanga? All these people that we really should bring into the conversation and who should become part of our understanding of who we are. And we should claim them in order to make ourselves stronger. Because this is, in the end, the purpose of Afrocentricity, to help us get back on our feet, become, much stronger, feel stronger, and, be African again. So thank you very much. I will stop here. Thank you.